Hello, welcome to session number 5 of the Mayamiko Introduction to Natural Dyeing course. So today we're going to be learning all about tannins, and this is the second part of our Fixing the Colour to the Fabric series. And so last session we learned all about mordanting with alum as part 1 of our Fixing the Colour, and this session is all about tannins. The final session of our preparation block, and then the next session we're going to move on to extracting the colour. So if we come back to this diagram, with each piece of fabric being made up of 3 different layers, last session we looked at this invisible layer, the bottom layer, which is the no colour fixer mordant, alum. And then this session, we're going to be looking at this middle layer. So the light yellow brown fixer dye, which is often known as a tannin. And don't worry if the word tannin is very strange and new to you. It was also very new to me when I started natural dyeing. I had never heard of the word tannin before, so everyone's in the same boat. But really, when we come to learn about what a tannin is simply a natural compound, and it's found abundantly in nature. We can find it in plants, in leaves, in roots, in the skins of fruit and vegetables, in nuts, in bark, and in wood. And there's some key points that will help you become more familiar with what a tannin is. And they often taste very bitter because they're in many different food and drinks that we consume. For instance, they're present in wine, in tea, and in coffee. They often produce a very light brown or light yellow colour. And they were most popular in the leather industry, in the tannin of leather, to produce the really beautiful, rich browns and natural tones. Tannins react with iron, which is also found in rusty nails, to produce different colours of greys and blacks and dark blues. And so we'll also be doing a bit of experimenting with that as well, because iron is another form of mordant, which we learned about last week. So when we come to think about the plants that are high in tannin in Malawi, this is where you really come in to help us, because I know that coffee and tea are grown in Malawi and are very abundant, and that they both contain tannin, but also ground nut hulls contain tannin. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but buvunguti fruit, either powdered or fresh, contain tannin, but we need to be careful when using it fresh because it can be known to be poisonous. Avocado skins, pomegranate skins also contain tannins, and I'm really sure that there are loads more that we haven't yet heard of or that I've listed which contain tannins which could be used during our dyeing process. So plants that will produce a good final colour, like the yellow from pomegranate skins, don't need extra tannin particularly because they already contain tannin in high quantities. So they react with the alum to create a bond naturally. It's the plants which contain less tannin, for example, onion skins, which requires this step because it really helps bond the colour to the fabric. So I did a few experiments with some local tannin plants to me. So this was using some fallen bark from the eucalyptus tree and some oak galls. And as you can see, I very slowly extracted the colour and it's created a really dark looking dye vat. And when I put the yarn in, it starts to create a really light kind of yellow goldish colour. And both of these plants are really great for tannin. barks and nuts and seeds tend to be really high in tannin, and often during different points of the season we'll find that they have fallen off the tree and we can collect them in abundance. So right now in the UK we're going into autumn, and so all of the oak galls have fallen from the trees and they're everywhere, and so really abundant source of natural tannin, and that's really what we're looking for. We want to identify a plant or a couple of plants that at different points during the year they are really easy for us to source and we can really cheap for us to source, and that we can use them throughout our dyeing process, because tannins will affect the types of colours that we get for our final outcome. And so just following on from that previous video, here are a few of my experimentations and my sampling process. So this is also good to note that when we do our sampling, whether we're using yarn or fabric, it's good to keep a record, keep a book, a notebook, where we can stick these samples into them. It doesn't need to be really fancy, it's just a working book, a working process, so that we don't get confused if we're using different types of fabric, and we can keep track of which colours we've made. So as you can see here, so I was using a mixture of wool and hemp for these experiments. We've also got some of the organic cotton in the swatches here near the top of the screen. And the acorns have given a really different variety of colour depending on the type of the fibre. So it will be interesting to see if with the organic cotton, you know, what types of tannins and types of colours we get, because we don't want necessarily really strong colours. We just want a base colour which provides us an opportunity to build on that with a brighter colour. So when we're thinking about how much tannin we need, again, this is when we need to start experimenting and taking notes. But we're going to start by using 20% of tannin to the weight of fabric. But this might be adjusted depending on the type of tannin plant we're using and the colours we can achieve. And so if we come back to this table here, which we've been using now for the last couple of sessions, and we have our plants, our pomegranate skins, onion skins and avocado stones, the example fabric weights, and then the tannin quantity. So because pomegranate skins are naturally high in tannin, we don't need to add another layer of tannin, and that goes the same for the avocado stones. There's nothing wrong with experimenting with trying a tannin layer with both pomegranate and avocado, because it will give us a different colour outcome, and actually we might really like that colour outcome. It will probably deepen the colour or give a more golden, browny or more yellow colour to the fabric. So it's still interesting to experiment, but from a technical point of view, tannin isn't needed because these plants are already high in tannin. So if we look at the onion skins, here we can see that I've done an example weight of 150 grams for the fabric. And if we're using the tannin at 20%, that means we need 30 grams of tannin. So that's kind of how we do the calculations. Again, really simple. And then once we've got the calculations, we then are going to move on to the videos which are going to follow in the next session. We're going to look at how we extract the colour. And the way that we extract the tannin is very similar, exactly the same to how we extract the colour for onion skins or pomegranate skins or our final dye plant. And so I'll be going through this process, extracting the dye colour in the next video, where we will wash and prepare the dye plants, weigh the dye plants, add the dye plants to the pot, and then boil and extract the colour. And then in the session after, we'll be looking at how we dye the fabric, and washing the fabric, putting the fabric into the dye, leaving the fabric in the dye, and then removing it and washing it. And so the way that this works for the tannin is that this will be the middle layer of our fabric, in terms of the dyeing process, and then we're going to repeat it all over again for the brighter colour, for the final colour. So then we'll have our complete 3 layers of fabric. So the next session, like I mentioned, is going to be all about extracting the colour. But I hope now you have a better understanding of what tannin is, and you can start to think of any really common nuts, seeds, plants, roots, or bark, which might be a waste product or might fall from the tree at certain points in the season, which we can use to create some light browns or light yellows for our middle layer of natural dyeing. Wonderful. See you in the next session where we're going to start the fun stuff and extracting the colour. Bye.